What is Dynasty football and why should you be playing it? All that and more in this episode of the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast.
You are Locked On Dynasty Football, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Here are your hosts, Marcus Mosher and Kate Magdziuk.
Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thank you for tuning in. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the candidates that you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/NFL. I am Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. She is Kate Magdziuk. Follow her on Twitter at Kate Magdziuk. Kate, it's a great day today. How are you doing?
It's a great day to be great. It's a great day to be a football fan. I'm every single day we get closer to the Super Bowl. I'm on cloud nine. I'm on a high. I'm amped. And you know what, Marcus, I think we needed to take a step back today, right? Like
I agree.
We've been talking a lot about what the dynasty season has meant for all 32 NFL teams. So if you missed those, please go back, check out our team by team breakdowns. But overall, we're going to sort of dive into like some off-season dynasty stuff. So this felt like a really good time to take a beat and go back to the basics. Welcome to Dynasty Football 101.
Yes. So if you are a longtime listener to this podcast, we appreciate you listening to this. This is just a recap of why you play Dynasty football, what it is, where to play it. We appreciate you listening to this. And if you're a new listener, this is the show for you. If you've never played Dynasty football before, this is why we love it. And this is why we devote 5 days a week talking about Dynasty football. So, Kate, my first question for you, if you've never heard of what Dynasty fantasy football is, what's the best way to explain it?
It is year-long fantasy football, much akin to managing a real NFL team. I think it's one of the best simulations of managing an actual NFL roster. You go through an annual draft where you pick up rookies and any unclaimed veterans. Obviously, that's sort of the differentiating factor between an NFL and a dynasty draft. But it's long term. There's no there's no buy-in every single year where you redraft your roster. Yeah, you pay your annual dues, you come in and you play with the same roster that you have. Once you draft a player, you keep him or you trade him or you cut him, but he's yours.
Yes. I will tell you the appeal for me was, I think it was like back in 2006, 2007. I drafted a player. I think it was Marion Barber, like in the double-digit rounds of this just of a redraft league. And it was, he had an awesome season. He scored a bunch of touchdowns, and it's like, I wish I could just keep him for the next year, right? Like I was the one that discovered how good of a player he was going to be. I had faith to keep him on my team. I wish I could keep him for the rest of his career. That's dynasty football in a nutshell, right? Like you watch these guys, you find the players that you believe are talented, they're going to be in the right situations, and then you get to keep them year over year. I think to me, that's the biggest appeal is if you believe that you are a good talent evaluator, that you know the NFL better than the rest of your league mates, it just removes a lot of the luck because you're betting on these guys' career, not just in one single season.
For sure. And one of the other things that I love about Dynasty is that like you typically get a bigger roster, right? Because you're holding on to these guys. There's not as much depth like in your typical waiver wire pool. Obviously, mid-season after the slew of injuries hits, waivers get thin. But like we're talking thin to the point where you might not have a startable, asset on your Dynasty waiver wire. So you get a lot of depth, but that also gives you a lot of freedom to, like you said, evaluate players, make your buy lows. And I don't know, it's just really nice. I've had a lot of teams over the years, Marcus, in redraft where you say to yourself, like, does the season have to end? Because I
love my team.
built
I love this team. Yes.
Yes, I finally built my super team why does the season have to end? And in Dynasty, it doesn't. You trade all year round. I love Dynasty fantasy football, and I guess that's why we're here, right? Hosting this podcast.
So let's talk a little bit more about the schedule of a dynasty league. So the regular season is just like it would be in your redraft leagues. The playoffs are the same. The biggest difference is there's not the big draft that you have, in August or early September, right before the league. What you have, and you mentioned it at the top, is a rookie draft where you draft the upcoming rookies and sometimes the free agents, depending on your league. But basically, your draft is a rookie draft of the skill players, much like an NFL draft. It's a lot of fun, but it's also different. I will say there are a lot of fantasy football people that don't like the rookie draft because they like drafting every year. So if that's your thing, is you like doing a big draft every year, then maybe Dynasty is not for you. But if you don't care, you like building your team and you like scouting the rookies, I think Dynasty would appeal to you.
Or Marcus, do what I do and get you a little bit of both, because I've got my Dynasty. I love Dynasty fantasy football, but of course I love redraft, and there is no shame in my game to loving a little bit of both. But Marcus, you mentioned the draft. So usually, and again, every league is kind of different, which is also another fun thing about
Which, yeah,
Dynasty.
I want to get to that in our next segment.
Yeah,
Yes, but please go ahead.
but usually you'll have your rookie draft right after the NFL draft, so you know sort of which rookies have been drafted into which situations, which teams, and you have a feel for the landscape, right? You know the draft capital. You
Mhm.
kind of have these extra factors that you can take into account when you're evaluating the players, not just based on their talent, based on their college performance, but based on situation. And you have that context. So usually those drafts will take place like first week of May. And
Yeah.
then, the floodgates open up. But there is no point really in the dynasty season where you're not able to make trades and get in the nitty-gritty. Oh god, dynasty is so great.
Yeah. Well, I want to talk about trading in just a bit because that is something that is wildly different in a dynasty league compared to just your regular family startup or your redraft league. I want to get to that in just a second because I do think dynasty leagues can be so different, whereas redraft leagues are pretty standard. The only thing that's a little bit different is, hey, is it a super flex or do we have 3 flex spots or just 2? Like, we're going to get to why these leagues are so wild and so different. Today's show is brought to you by LinkedIn. As a small business owner or hiring manager, you know that success in 2023 all depends on the team members that you surround yourself with. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. With LinkedIn Jobs, you can hire qualified candidates more efficiently by matching open roles with people who have the skills, value, and experience to help you achieve your goals. LinkedIn Jobs helps you quickly attract qualified candidates to your open jobs with targeting tools. They go beyond resume data by using insights from your job post, company, and their 875 million member profiles to put your post in front of the most qualified candidates. Identify those most qualified candidates on LinkedIn Jobs and connect with them fast and for free. LinkedIn Jobs makes it easy to screen and rate applicants based on your job qualifications, all in one platform. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates that you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That is linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, Kate. One of the reasons I love Dynasty football so much is because I'm in several Dynasty leagues and they're all wildly different. For example, I'm in a dynasty league where you keep 8 players. Okay. The rosters are like 17 to 18 players, right? You keep 8. So it's a partial dynasty league. I'm in another one where you keep 35, right? Those are technically dynasty leagues, but they are completely different from another. Can you tell us a little bit more about how some of these dynasty leagues are structured?
Yeah, absolutely. So typically, Marcus, like I would say the bulk of these dynasty leagues are probably more like the second one that you mentioned, where you
Yes.
keep like 100% of your roster. Typically, roster sizes will be made up usually anywhere from, on average in my leagues, 25 to 30 players.
25 is the number that seems most common. Yes.
Yes. So basically, that means let's say you have a 12-person dynasty and you have 25 players apiece. That is 300 players off the market instantly. Um, and again, that lends itself to the reason why there's no depth on the waiver wire. So that's why trading becomes so
Yes.
important to dynasty fantasy football because of that lack of waiver wire availability. But again, because of this, this long depth, this long bench, you are going to have multiple quarterbacks, even if you're in a single quarterback league.
Mhm.
You're going to have a lot of depth at wide receiver. You're going to have a lot of depth at every single position. Um, is all of it quality depth? No,
No.
not really. But like I
That's why we
have
do a promotion commotion segment every week, because we try to find guys that are buried in your bench to put them in your starting lineup. But please go ahead.
Yes, and I mean, like, that's what becomes so important is finding these sort of gems, especially as the season goes on and these injuries stack up.
You mentioned trading, and I think to me that's one of the biggest appeals in Dynasty League, because in my redraft leagues, there's not a lot of trading, right? You do your draft, there might be a trade here or there, partly because it's just hard to trade. But in a Dynasty League, the benefit is there's no, I mean, at least in my leagues, there's no trade deadline, where in a startup league or a redraft league, there's what, trade deadline sometimes week 7, week 8. In a Dynasty League, it's all year long, because you might be going into the playoffs and you need an extra running back. So you're willing to give up your first round pick next year or your second round pick this year to go for a title. It just makes, if you want to be in a league that's really active and you're having conversations all the time about players, I think dynasty football is more for you.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be said with the volume of trades just that I see in my dynasty leagues compared to the rookie leagues. But again, that comes out of necessity, but it also comes down to what I think is one of the most important parts of dynasty fantasy football is evaluating your own roster. So let's say you start your dynasty league with your friends, there's 12 of you, and you draft your 25 players apiece. Well, you have to look at that group of players that you've assembled and ask yourself, am I in a place to win?
Mhm.
And every single trade you make, every single move you make in your dynasty comes down to, I think, asking yourself that question. Because if you're in a spot to win, that's great. The goal should always be to win. But much like the NFL, like I said, this fantasy format is very akin to the NFL. If you're not in a place where you're going to be competitive, then maybe it's time to rebuild and take things back down to scratch. Because if you have a middling roster and you never quite go all in for the talent, but the rookie picks that you're getting,
Mhm.
they're a little bit later, you're not getting the cream of the crop, you can just kind of sit in purgatory. And
Yep.
that's the absolute worst place for your dynasty team to be, because you're never good enough to compete, but you're never bad enough to get that top end draft capital, which might be a Jonathan Taylor, a
Sure.
Bijan Robinson. You're never going to get them.
I would also say another appeal to dynasty football is, listen, we've all been in redraft leagues, even people that are considered quote unquote experts in fantasy, where you just have a bad year, right? Like somebody gets injured, your first round pick gets injured, you're sitting at 3-7 after 10 weeks, and you know that you're not going to make it to the playoffs, and you know that your team's basically done. The next 7 or 8 weeks of fantasy football are going to suck for you. They just are, right? But in dynasty, if you're 3-7, you're still really active, right? You're thinking about, okay, hey, what guy could I trade away now for a future pick? Because I'm trying to think of an example for this last year. Maybe it's Leonard Fournette, right? Leonard or James Conner. Hey, James Conner No, he's not my long-term plans. Can I flip him for a second round pick and build up more draft capital? Or, hey, is this a time for me to go out and trade for a Kyle Pitts when, he's out for the season, but I still think I love his long-term value. Every owner, no matter where you're at in the season, no matter what your record is going to be involved because there's no incentive to just throw in the towel and, hey, well, I'll wait till next year's draft. No, you got to be making moves to build this dynasty team because you're going to be in it for the long run. So that's, again, another appeal to dynasty football for me.
Yeah, I think that long-term engagement is so important, and that's what makes these dynasties so valuable long-term, right? Like, it gets you invested in your dynasty league. Now, I think we can talk about, a few more things, right? Let's talk about where we should host our dynasty leagues if we want to start something up. Let's talk about some of the resources that we like to use when it comes to dynasty fantasy football. And do we have any tips that we can give for our newbies and any rules to live by when it comes to dynasty?
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. This year, the only app that you need at your Super Bowl party is FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. We're really excited to partner with FanDuel because, listen, I use it all the time. It's the only place that I've been placing bets this year. If you're new to FanDuel, that's actually even better because they have so many great features for new players. It's absolutely incredible. Just download the FanDuel app now so you can bet on Super Bowl 57 with a no sweat first bet. You'll get up to $3,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. FanDuel lets you bet on literally everything and anything from the money line to point spreads, who will score a touchdown, to what jersey number will the first player be that scores a touchdown. I think the over-under is like 11.5. It's a fun bet. The FanDuel Sportsbook app is safe, secure, and super easy to use. Best of all, you can get paid your winnings instantly when you win. So join FanDuel today at FanDuel.com/lockedon to claim your no sweat first bet on Super Bowl 57. That is FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, Kate, you teased it. Where's the best place in your mind to play dynasty football?
I think there are two places that come to mind, and it really comes down to your league and what kind of scoring settings you want. How much do you want to customize it? But for me, the easiest place 100% is the Sleeper app. Relatively newer on the scene of fantasy football, but making their way into the mainstream fantasy conversation. They have, you can play keeper leagues, you can play redraft on Sleeper, but their premise and their user interface for setting up rookie drafts and carrying over your league from year to year, super, super easy. Now, the more customizable of the two would be myfantasyleague.com, but there's a catch. It costs money. And that's the thing, my friend.
I will say I've played on my fantasy league for a decade now. It's probably my preferred platform just because it makes it really easy to trade draft picks, which is a huge part of dynasty leagues, right? It makes it really easy to set lineups. It's very customizable. If you want to be in a best ball league, which if you're not familiar with best ball is, it just starts your best lineup every week. You don't have to make roster decisions. I know that's very popular in the dynasty community where you just assemble talent and it'll put the best players in your lineup every week, the highest score possible. I love that. Both are fantastic options, though.
Both are fantastic options. Now, looking at my fantasy league, what kind of investment might you be looking at if you decide to go with like this more customizable interface? This year, $79.95 if you purchase access for your league prior to June 10th. No, this is not a sponsorship. But I want to make sure you know what you're getting into, because what a lot of leagues will do if they do decide to host their league on my fantasy league is build those league dues or build that cost for my fantasy league into their league dues so that everybody is splitting the cost. It doesn't come back to the commissioner. But if you're
If you have
just
10
looking to
teams, it's less than, it's $8 a person. It's not that big of a deal.
yeah, it's not a big deal, and, especially for some of these, like, bigger leagues, bigger buy-ins, it really becomes sort of, a small drop in the pond, but,
Yep.
again, if you're newbies and you just wanna get your feet wet and you're not ready to buy in, perfect I think Sleeper is the perfect alternative and actually is my one of my favorites, so
I I will say I play on several I'm in several dynasty leagues that are hosted on ESPN. ESPN is not as friendly to dynasty communities. However, it's possible, right? We set up a Google Doc, a sheet where you could go and look at previous trades and track your draft picks. So if all of your other leagues are on ESPN and you just want to play in a dynasty league on there, you can do it. Just be warned, it's not quite as user friendly. Do want to mention a couple resources. The one that it's kind of the Bible of dynasty football is dynastyleaguefootball.com, DLF. We reference it basically on every single show. Ryan McDowell, the other co-host on this podcast, does a
heard of them.
fantastic job of running that over there. If you are serious about getting into dynasty football, you've got to check out dynastyleaguefootball.com. Again, not a promo or not a sponsor, but seriously, they've got everything from startup ADP, recent trades that are going on in leagues, rankings, articles, podcasts. Seriously, everything.
Yeah, that's definitely, I think, the most comprehensive resource for any dynasty content. Marcus, you mentioned all of their tools. When it comes to ADP, right, average draft position for these various players, uh, they manually hold 6 dynasty startup mock drafts every single month,
Mhm.
and provide that average draft position. But it's not just you get that data, you can go back, you can trend the data. So you can see, how much has Tua's dynasty value in a startup fallen, or how much has Kyle Pitt's dynasty value fallen? Has it? You can use all of these tools to kind of gauge your trade market. You can literally type in a player's name and
Mhm.
see recent trades made in real fantasy leagues involving that player in Dynasty. There's a lot of really cool tools. Another resource that I want to shout out is RotoViz.
Mm.
One of my favorite sort of low key. I don't hear people talking about the tools
Oh
that
my gosh, they're
RotoViz has
awesome.
in us, but they have a ton available. So they've got a really solid rookie guide for those people who just need, a little bit of briefing. Dynasty rookie drafts can be really intimidating if you're not familiar with the player pools coming out of college. But also, they've just got really interesting tools like one of my favorites, the Game Splits app. So,
Yes. Yeah.
like, I use that all the time when I'm looking, okay, so how does Khalil Herbert perform when David Montgomery isn't active? It's super
Yes.
easy to use, but I use these tools to kind of uh, help predict certain situations in Dynasty, like the aforementioned Khalil Herbert and David Montgomery. What can I expect if David Montgomery doesn't resign from Khalil Herbert? I'm going to use these tools to help me figure it out.
One more thing that I want to mention before we go. There's so many great dynasty people on Twitter. I can't even list them all, but I want to shout out Ryan McDowell, who is the co-host of this podcast. You can follow him on Twitter at RyanMC23. He's just an outstanding resource. But if you're looking to get into dynasty football, nearly every day he'll post about a league that's looking for a new owner, right? Or leagues that are looking to fill up. He's a fantastic person to go follow because if you do want to jump into a league, but you just don't know that many people around you that play dynasty football, he'll hook you up. So uh, again, Ryan, Matt Williamson, Williamson NFL also does a good job at that. So those are two that I would highly, highly recommend.
Absolutely. I mean, the Dynasty community very active on Twitter. So, like, join up, look at the hashtag Dynasty. You're going to find a lot of people having similar conversations. But even my fantasy league, their Twitter account, they'll post, uh,
Yes.
you know, like trade polls. It's really fun, and you can get into player debates. It's a community, and it's a way that, you can kind of replicate that that urgency and that passion that you have for
Mhm.
your home league in another league, but it's all year round, which I don't know, it makes my heart
It's so
warm.
much. That is it for today's show. Thank you for making Locked On Dynasty your first listen every day. Subscribe to the Locked On NFL podcast and get daily conversations on the biggest NFL stories, plus in-depth analysis of the biggest games with the NFL key predictions every Friday. And on Monday, local insiders cover the weekend with game-to-game episodes. Locked On NFL available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. We're going to continue with some more Dynasty 101 over the next couple of weeks as we get time. So we'll talk about trading, rookie drafts, how to build your rosters, all that kind of stuff. But if you have any questions about Dynasty leagues, please send them to us. You can follow Kate on Twitter at Kate Magdziuk. I'm at Marcus_Mosher. We'll answer them the best that we can. We'll jump on. We'll try to do some podcasts about it. So we thank you guys for always listening. And we'll be back tomorrow to talk more Dynasty football.